Well, what's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, or wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with your man, Measureaholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another faction overview for the Divided Impera Overhaul mod for Total War Rome 2. Today, we are checking out Sparta, finally. This has been a very long requested faction. I appreciate your guys' patience. But yeah, I've been wanting to do this for quite a while now, but we also had a lot of other Hellenic factions to get through that are even more highly requested, so appreciate your guys' suggestions. Please do keep them coming. Roads in Egypt are very much close to being part of our series now. They'll probably be one of our next factions, so please drop your suggestions below. Basically, it's between Rhodes and Egypt for our next overview, so let me know what you guys think. But beyond that, please do give me some more barbarian faction requests. We have the majority of the Celts to go through still. We've only covered one Germanic faction, and then we also have some Eastern factions to get involved with. So yeah, any and all suggestions are welcome as always. But anyway, let's jump on in to the Spartan overview. So obviously we are part of the Polis Hellenici cultural group, which means with the following factions, Rhodes, Pergamon, and Athens, we share the following perks. We have the Greek knowledge, which gives us plus 5% research rate. Not a massive boost, but it's still appreciated. I think you have plus 2 to cultural conversion, which will be very nice in helping convert your barbarian neighbors to the north, such as the Illyrians and the Thracians. It will be very helpful indeed. However, what does Sparta itself get? Well, first off, you get the Helit repression perk, which has a decreased slave unhappiness. Basically, it means that your slaves will be less likely to cause rebellion, which is always very nice because slaves can actually be a massive boost to your economy if you know how to handle it correctly and get the right buildings. Just looting cities will get you a massive amount of slaves, so I do recommend you try that out in your campaigns. This will be very helpful for you in controlling that because slaves do cause a lot of public unrest, and that's just in the vanilla DEI version. If you're using submods, good luck with your public order. And then the second perk, though, the Spartans get is the Spatiate Warriors perk, which increases experience ranks for your Spartan infantry recruits when they are recruited. So when you recruit a member of your core Spartan military, that unit will have an extra rank on top of it, plus whatever other ranks it's getting. For example, you start off as a kingdom as Sparta, and all of your military units actually get plus 1 experience rank upon being recruited. So that's actually super helpful and will help demonstrate your units having that higher tier quality compared to the other Greek city-states. So that's very nice, always appreciated. Then you have the Laconic Austerity debuff, which decreases wealth from industrial and commerce buildings. This one stings a little. This is a pretty solid debuff. Basically, your Spartan economy is going to be struggling very early on. The way that I managed to get my economy going in my main campaign that I uploaded to YouTube, which I'll link down below in case you guys are interested. And then, of course, you have the Laconic Austerity debuff, which decreases wealth from industrial and commercial buildings. This one stings a little bit because your economy is struggling in the early game. You have some fairly high upkeep units and you don't have a lot of income flowing in. So this will hurt you mainly in the early game, but once you get to the mid game and you're starting to own cities with resources and you're getting trade flowing, your economy will stabilize to some extent. But your economy will probably always be a bit of an issue because your units are fairly expensive, and that's how it is for quite a few factions that are kind of like Sparta. For example, the Seleucids would be a good one. Macedon, they use a lot of core Greek units that are fairly expensive. Especially your elites. Your elites will be hard to get a lot of. So until the late game anyway, your economy will be struggling. But that's all I have to say about that. And before I jump into the part 1 section of this video, I do just want to say, if you're new to the channel or if you're not new but you somehow missed out, I did just recently complete a Spartan campaign on DEI. It was a very long campaign. It was a lot of fun, and we got to play with the entire Spartan roster. So if you do want to go check that out, I will link that in a pinned comment just down below underneath the video. Feel free to go check it out and enjoy that playlist. But anyway, let's jump into the part 1 section of this video where we'll check out the campaign situation for Sparta. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the part 1 section of this video. Let's check out the situation for Sparta in the Grand Campaign. So obviously we start off with Sparta. That's right, you are a one-hitter quitter faction. I know I've said that a lot in these faction overviews, and this is once again true for Sparta. You have no other possessions. However, this section of Greece only has the one city, so I guess you could kind of argue that you have all of these cities down here under your thumb, but in the terms of Total War Rome 2, all we have is this, sadly. You have one spy right here, and then you have one army inside of Sparta itself. It's led by your king or basileus. You have your general's bodyguard unit, a Spartan Hoplite unit, a Spartan youth unit, which is basically a young Spartan spear unit, and then you have your Helit javelinmen or your slave javelinmen. And that is it for your initial material possessions. So since we've now considered what you have, well, how are you going to get more? Well, Sparta is actually really limited in its options. You basically have two options. One, you take Athens on like turn 3 or 4. Or you could ally with Athens and then march up here and then take Larissa and the other cities of Greece. Within the first 5 to 10 turns, you do need to be very quick. The longer you take, the more time Macedon has to build up their armies, which will outclass yours with their pikemen and come down and thrash you in Athens. But the second main option, in my opinion, is of course the M word. It is time to migrate. If you checked out my Spartan campaign, you would know that I initially migrated down to Crete, and then from Crete I went straight on down, took on Alexandria in Egypt, and we basically created a Spartan pharaoh kingdom down here. It was really awesome, made for an awesome story. I really loved it. You don't have to do that. It is a pretty decent option though. Your armies will be better than Egypt's unless they're using a lot of pikemen, but in the early game they don't bring too many against you. So that is one option for you. Another option is for you to go northeast up into the Black Sea, take over the Bosporan kingdom. It would help you to take over a Greek settlement if you do migrate, because then you can use their population. So if not the Arch-Bosporus people, then you could come west over here and take out Massalia. I wouldn't recommend that one, although that would be like a nice challenge campaign. That would be a lot of fun. But the Massalia is an awesome faction on their own, so just go play as them. You may as well. And that's basically it in what I would give as a recommendation for migrations. You basically just want to go to another area where there's Greeks and take over there and get the population under your thumb. Of course, there's also Syracuse and Sicily, but no one wants to be in that situation. Even Syracuse doesn't want to be in that situation. Anyway, so now with that out of the way, let's talk very quickly about your economy. I did mention before that you'll be suffering in regards to industry and commerce, at least in the early to mid game probably. That's because your buildings regarding industry and commerce won't be making as much money as normal. In addition, however, you are struggling because you are a landlocked nation. You have no port, so your trade is literally limited to just Athens. That's it. There's no other trade available on turn 1. That's a really big downer. Trade can really help you get going, and it's not even the trade itself, but honestly, because here the projected value is 92. That's pathetic. But what you can do if the people are very likely to want trade with you is get money from them, get payments from them, get 3,000 or more from them, and that will be a big boost to your economy in the very first few turns that you have. It'll let you recruit that full army, get you those few extra units to win the day and start expanding and building your empire. So trade is going to be a big issue for you, which means your economy is going to be struggling in the early game, especially if you stay in Sparta. Because even if you do instantly declare war, you're still only going to be attacking Athens. Athens itself is a city with a decent amount of population. It has 25,000. However, it has no resources, and even then, you're instantly going to have to be fighting other Greeks up here to the north. So taking Athens isn't going to all of a sudden make you a massive trade empire. You will be able to get trade with other factions, but that's if they don't hate you. And if you fight Athens, there's a chance that they will. So now we've basically covered our economy, which is, in summary, early game is going to be hard with your economy, but once you expand and get trade resources under your belt, that's when you'll be able to build a trade empire, just like any other faction really, and get money flowing in. So take a port settlement, get trade flowing, and then as you take more resources, such as the wine in Apollonia or the slaves up in Thrace, then you will be doing quite well. That's economy out of the way. So next, diplomacy. Well, you actually have literally nothing going on. Despite you being in the very diplomatic Greece, you have no diplomacy with anyone, not even Athens, not even Knossos to your south. Nobody. If we click on them and check, no treaties. You have history with certain factions, which is why some of these different attitudes are different. But I wouldn't trust these at all, to be honest. I don't know what it is, man. But in my campaigns as Sparta, the diplomacy, I feel like it's a little bit more random when you're going up against Greek nations in particular. For example, in at least 75% of my campaigns that I've done as Sparta, which is probably about 5 or 6, at least 5 or 6 midterm campaigns, Knossos down here will attack me on turn 2 75% of the time. That's a lot, which is funny considering that initially you start off with them being very friendly. So basically, don't trust these attitudes. The AI, as a general rule of thumb, is random. It does have some influences that the DEI team tried to make on them because CA just made the AI basically be random diplomatically. They can declare war on you no matter how much they love you. It's a very weird love-hate relationship thing. But anyway, diplomacy can be very random, and so you do need to be careful. It's very common for Knossos down here, or Knossos, however you want to say it, will declare war on you. And because they're over here, don't get mistaken, they will send an army to come land. They will actually usually land right here on your shoreline and then come attack Sparta within the first 10 turns. So be very careful of that. But the rest of your diplomacy though, Athens is usually more than willing to set up some sort of alliance with you. It depends how much on your difficulty. If you're playing on normal, you'll probably get a defensive alliance pretty quickly. They will be fighting Macedon every single time you play. And Macedon usually conquers the Aetolian League over here, and they make them a client state, and then they will also join the war. So basically, we're having a massive civil war between the Greeks of the south versus the north. And that's going to be your entire early game. If you can't beat Macedon in your early game, then you're done. It's time to restart your campaign. Macedon will be your arch nemesis. They're not even that big. They only have the one city. However, it is a good city because it's walled, it's massive. They do have the potential to get very good mercenary and AOR units up here. But the main thing that Macedon has over you and Athens and the Aetolian League is pikes. These other factions can get pikes, but they usually don't really for a while. The Aetolians I've seen get them, but usually not until the mid-game, if they survive that long. Macedon will start off with pikes, and they will be coming for your hoplites. Even though your hoplites are amazing, especially your elite Spartan hoplites, their pikemen will still give you a solid run for your money, and they will really kill a lot of your men, which are irreplaceable. And I'll get into why they're irreplaceable shortly. But anyway, that's basically how your early game diplomacy is going to go. Crete will declare war on you and invade. Athens will usually be friendly. And then it's usually kind of random what other Greek nations to the east will be friendly. Rhodes is kind of random. Pergamon is usually a bit of a safer bet. They will often get trade with you as long as you don't get relations with their enemies. One extra thing I would add though is once you do get a port settlement, get trade with Egypt straight away. And basically befriend Egypt as much as you can. They're going to be more useful to you than the Seleucids. And if you get a good alliance with Egypt, you can even use them to basically take on the Seleucids at the same time. Probably a little bit more towards your mid-game there, but just in the early game, get good relations with Egypt as soon as you can. That is a very handy tip in my opinion. But anyway, that's pretty much your diplomacy out of the way. Things are kind of up in the air, but the majority of the time it's usually a north versus south situation in Greece. Actually, before we move on from our diplomacy, there is one extra thing I'll say. You have emperors up here, right? Usually they're not really going to focus on coming down and attacking in the south. They're at war with Rome at the beginning of the campaign. Rome will usually knock them out within the first 15-20 turns. and Rome will take Apollonia from them. As long as the Illyrians don't first. They often kind of race for it. But in my opinion, you should really try to take Apollonia very, very quickly, because you do not want Rome getting a foothold in Greece. If you take this and then you get good relations with Rome, especially since you're fighting their enemy, so you should, that will really give you a fairly comfortable campaign for the majority of the time. Eventually you'll probably end up fighting Rome as like a late game enemy. That would be a lot of fun, and your armies actually will be really effective if you use good pikes. But yeah, if Rome gets a foothold here and you can't get good relations with them, man, forget Macedon. Rome will demolish you. And they get Apollonia frighteningly quickly, so do try to make that extra effort to get up there. It will save you a lot of hurt in the long run. But anyway, now that's where we'll stop your diplomacy. The next thing we have to talk about, and this is going to be something I'm going to talk a lot about throughout the entire video, especially when we get to the military section, is of course your population. Sparta, of all the factions in DEI, is notorious for having massive population issues, and it is actually very authentic and very historical, because this is the point in history where Sparta is dying. The glory days of Sparta are basically long gone now. Sparta has suffered defeats. They've lost a lot of their manpower in the process, and because they haven't really changed their ways and are still focused on the Spartan citizen being above everybody else, and they're their primary warrior, your best units will be coming from a very small percentage of your population. And that's going to be throughout your entire campaign. This isn't something that you can fix. This isn't something that you can basically try to min-max and get out of. It's almost always going to be a massive issue. Unless you get very lucky, you get a very fertile city and you min-max your buildings insanely correctly. But even then, you're always going to have some kind of population issues. So what are those issues exactly? Well, let's have a look at Sparta. You start off with 20,000 people in your city. That's quite small, considering the majority of other factions will start off with 25 to 35k. 20k is pretty small. In addition, let's look at your actual population. So your Homioi social class is at 772 at turn 1. That is really horrible, because the Homioi class is where your core Spartan troops come from. This is your Spartan Hoplites. This is the absolute cream and butter of the Spartan army. You only have 700 men that you can recruit, in addition to your one Spartan Hoplite you have and your general's bodyguard. In addition, that also covers your cavalry. Your Spartan cavalry come from that social class as well. That is massive. That is such a big deal. We're getting 3 extra units, so a total of 4, and all of your social class for the Homioi is gone. That's it. Now you will replenish it, and you can get about 6 to 8 units within the first probably 10-ish turns, maybe 15 turns. However, you will need to basically sit and wait for your men to be born and grow and retrain and everything. And even then, if you do get a full army of Spartans, say you get like 10 units of Spartan Hoplites, you go and attack Athens, right? Your men take pretty solid casualties, as you would assaulting a city, and you lose, say, 3 out of the 10 units. Those 3 units that you recruited, they're going to be very hard to replace. Not insanely hard, because you've just taken Athens, which is a Greek city, and then the culture should be 100% Hellenic. It is down here at least. So if you have a high Hellenic culture, then you'll be able to use their social class and try to repopulate based on that. But if we check their current social class, their highest tier, the Eugenes social class, is only 1,000, which is basically the same as your Homioi social class. So 1,000 men isn't a lot to replace your army, and you're going to continue expanding, and you'll take over these Greek city-states, and you'll be able to use their population. But once you get out of Greece, you're going up against barbarians pretty much across the board, except for the coastal Greek cities down here. Then that is where you're going to see the massive drop in the amount of Spartans you'll have in your army. That was a thing that I dealt with throughout my entire campaign that I uploaded to YouTube. You guys will see it. The only time that I really was able to feel consistent, like 8 to 10 units of Spartans in a single army, is when I took a big Greek city and that city had a lot of high class or high social class citizens. For example, Pergamon was really good. I got them to join a confederation. They had a large population of their upper class citizens there, and I was able to get at least 6 units in like one turn of just pure Spartan warriors. So that was fantastic. But that was it. It didn't grow back quickly. And so that is going to be a consistent thing throughout your campaign. You're going to struggle with your homoioi social class units. Furthermore, your perioikoi swordsmen, which is basically your second tier citizens, they actually are very useful to you because they can provide you with some pretty solid hoplites, to be honest. These guys are around the same level as Athenian hoplites, if not maybe even slightly better. In fact, I would argue that they're just slightly better. But your perioikoi social class is also lacking. You only have 2,300 on turn 1, which isn't a lot, because you're going to be using the perioikoi to fulfill the majority of your battle line in the early game. In fact, probably throughout most of the game. The one thing that you do not really have to worry about is your slave population, otherwise known as the Helits. You have a lot of Helit units that you can recruit. They are not very good. The morale is generally quite low, and as is their equipment and armor and things like that. However, these Spartan light hoplites are actually pretty friggin' good considering. And they're also quite cheap, which is nice. Yeah, we have these Spartan Helits here, basically like a levy unit, but they have an upkeep of 46 per turn. That's insanely low. You have Skiry Peltis. These guys are very good, very useful. They also have guerrilla deployment, as does your Skiry Swordsman right here, which also have the stalk ability. Yeah, ooh, that's very nice indeed. And even campaign stealth and their discipline. So your perioikoi will be struggling, but you can recruit a lot of very cheap Helits units. They're not going to be very good, but they will fulfill auxiliary roles for you, such as skirmishing down here, whether you use javelinmen, slingers, or archers. That will help you out quite a bit. And then of course you also have your mercenaries that you need to recruit from, which is basically your foreigners or your xenoi social class. That shouldn't be too much of an issue at all, and in fact that is also what will be fulfilling a lot of your roles in your military. You could form entire battle lines out of these units if you use enough of them. I know I did a lot in my Spartan campaigns, especially using like Egyptian units like cavalry and their levies. They were very useful, and the xenoi social class will be very abundant once you get out of Greece in particular. But at the beginning of the campaign you have 5,000 of that to play with, so you'll be able to get plenty of mercenaries. That won't be a problem. But yeah, I just have to really hammer that home. Population will be a massive issue for you pretty much throughout your whole campaign. In the late game, that's when things are getting easier regardless, so it doesn't matter so much. But early on, when you're relying on your high tier hoplites to win you the day, you really got to be sure that you want to commit them to a fight. Just because they're fantastic doesn't mean that you send them in the first wave, not even the second wave. Save it for the third wave if you can. If you know what I'm saying, be careful when you dedicate your hoplites to a battle formation, or to at least to engage in the battle formation. It's just all about timing, and they are basically irreplaceable, so keep that in mind. But anyway, I've rambled on enough for the grand campaign situation. Now let's jump into the part 2 section of this video, where we'll check out the military of Sparta. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the part 2 section of this video, where we'll be checking out the military of Sparta. So here we are before the statue of Zeus at Mount Olympus. That's right, there's actually a very cool statue down here, and some amazing detail for these tiles, which almost no one's probably going to see because it's such a rare battle map to have, but it is insanely cool. I thought I'd show you guys that at least. But anyway, here we are checking out these Spartan large military units, and here we are with, of course, the iconic, the Spartan 300. This is your only general bodyguard unit. That's right, you do not get to upgrade, you don't get any cavalry as a bodyguard unit. This is it. This is your best Spartan hoplites. 300 of them. It quite literally is 300 men. So that means that they have a lot of men to do a lot of damage. Despite them being only infantry and being quite heavily armored, so they're slow moving, these guys are frigging insane. I've seen them get 800 plus kills in battles just from holding choke points. Depending on whatever units they're going up against, as long as they're not being outflanked and are attacking from the front, these guys can do insane amounts of damage. It's quite frankly almost ridiculous. It's as if all of these 300 bodyguard units are just like the OP Spartans from the 300 movie. It's just, wow. It's almost as if all of these Spartan units are from the Spartan movie 300, where they're all just like superheroes just demolishing dozens of men at a time. That's how it is here too. These guys are incredibly powerful. Do not be afraid to throw your general into the mix. Do be careful though, as he can get killed off quite easily from that, but your general usually has quite a few extra hit points, and even then your unit has fantastic stats. Let's check it out. Melee attack of 10, melee defense of 21, just straight out the gate. Charge bonus of 21, which is actually not terrible considering it's just a hoplite unit. Weapon damage of 26, which is quite nice. Doesn't really have any armor pen at only just 4. Has an armor of 38, so that's very, very nice indeed. Especially for a hoplite, combining that with your melee defense. It's insanely high. And out of that 21 melee defense, 7 is shield value. So that shield is massive, and it does help a massive amount. Base morale of 62, and the bonus versus cav and elephants of 14 each. And of course, you have the Phalanx ability.
Orders understood.
This will boost your bonus versus cav and elephants, even boost your melee armor piercing by 1, and gives you a boost to armor. Basically, it just makes your unit last a lot longer in combat, especially against cavalry and elephants. And you really want them fighting in this formation too, as they will be using different attacks. So usually just use their spears in combat, unless the enemy gets too close. If you leave them out of the phalanx formation, not only will they be quite a little bit more loose in their formation, but they often won't actually be using their spears. They'll swap to their swords, and that's actually not very good at all. They're not going to do anywhere near as well outside of their formation as they will in it. So try to remember to turn on that phalanx ability when you need it. Otherwise, I would say try to keep it off so you can move your general around as needed, because he's already going to be very slow with just a speed of 2, which is super, super low. But anyway, as you can see, we have a fair amount of units to get through. Not too many, but quite a few. So we'll get into that. I thought before we get into our massive amount of spears, let's do our skirmishers, then we'll do our melee infantry, and then we'll get to the spears. So let's do it that way. So first off, let's check out your allied archers. I believe this is your periodical, your social class unit that you get access to a little bit later on in the campaign. Nothing really special here, and I'm going to be saying that quite a lot for most of your skirmishers. They're not too terrible. They do have an armor of 20, which is actually kind of decent, but their missile damage is only at 15, which is very low for an archer. Your Helid archers have a damage at 14 though, so it's better than that, I guess. Beyond that, no other stats worthy of mentioning at all, really. They just have good armor. Standard range of 165. So these guys are better than your Helid archers, but you could probably use a social class that they come from better, or just getting cheap Helid archers instead, or trying to focus on getting some mercenary archers, which you'll have some of the best of. You have Cretan archers available to you in droves, and then if you go east and take out Syria, which you probably will, then you have access to Syrian heavy archers, which are fantastic. So I wouldn't worry too much with your archers.
Missile infantry ready.
I'm basically gonna, let's just summarize these 3 units here. So you have your Helit javelinmen,
Slingers.
Helit slingers,
Archers.
and Helit archers. Notice I said Helit before each of the types of units that I said for this. That's because they're all Helits, they're all slaves of Sparta, basically. And because they're slaves, they generally have very low morale. This unit only has a morale of 30. They all have literally no armor. Yep, all no armor. All very poor melee attack and defense stats. Basically, they just serve to be the bare function of what each unit is. This is a javelin unit, they throw javelins. This is a slinger unit, they'll use slingers. This is a archer unit, they'll use a bow and arrow. So that's it for your Helot units, and you have all three of them. However, that is not it for your skirmishers. You then have some Perioikoi Peltus over here, or your Skirite Peltus. They're not terrible, but they're also not all that great. The one thing that you will enjoy with them is that they have guerrilla deployment and the stalk ability and the snipe ability. Although I don't know how useful that snipe ability would be. That snipe ability is supposed to mean that as they're throwing their javelins, they actually shouldn't get spotted. But you have to be super close in order to throw their javelins, so I don't know how useful that would be, like I said. But the guerrilla deployment is nice. You can use this to try and get behind the enemy and let them come out of their hiding hole and then hit their heavy units in the back. So that's quite useful to have a javelin unit that can do that. But beyond that, they do come from your Perioikoi social class, so keep that in mind. As will these allied peltus, I believe. And these guys are definitely a step up pretty much every way. They even have a decent melee defense of 12, a good attack of 9, and an armor of 25, which is quite respectable. So these guys, this is your skirmishing bread and butter mainly. You have the bare minimum for archers and slingers, but really, being a Greek city-state, as the game progresses and you receive more reforms, you will be focusing on using peltus to support your army, at least from your main roster. You can always use AOR and mercenary archers and whatever, but these guys are definitely going to be the main thing you recruit out of all of your skirmishers. They will do good damage with their javelins, and then after that they can get involved in an extended melee and do quite well, especially against low armored units. They will do very well indeed. Highly useful, highly recommend you get these guys. And of course they only have a population of they only have a number of men in their unit of 175, which is the same for all of your skirmisher units. And that's it. Despite having quite a few units here, we have 6 different units. The majority of them aren't really worth recruiting, except to do their bare minimum role. I mean, they can be quite helpful. Helot archers can be quite useful in a campaign. They can help you hold a settlement and just get some extra arrows fired out on the enemy. But once they use those arrows, they're going to be beyond useless, really. They'll die for you, and they'll die quickly. So even then, they're not going to hold a choke point or anything. Just be very careful with your skirmishers. Use those fantastic mercenary units that are available in Greece and the surrounding areas from Rhodes and Crete and etc. Use them as much as you can. That's it for your skirmishing department though. Now let's move on to your melee swordsman, and then we'll get to your spearmen. So straight away we're going back to the Perioikoi, the Skiry swordsman here. These guys are actually very, very useful, and I really recommend you get at least 2 units per army, especially early on. You could even get 4 or more units, because these guys are actually really good. They have a melee attack of 14, which means that they're going to be hitting the enemy quite a lot, and they have a weapon damage of 22, a melee AP of 4, and then a charge bonus that's really low at 16 now. So these guys are not shock infantry by any means. These guys kind of operate in how your peltas do in melee. Get them behind the enemy. If you can do that, these guys will actually get a lot of friggin' kills. It's very surprising. Even with their stats, they aren't amazing with their stats. They're good, but they will do a lot better than what their stats give them credit for. I'm not sure why that is, but I always had them getting 200, 300, 400 kills in my campaigns. So it's very impressive, and they have a base morale of 49, which is very, very good, to be honest. That's quite impressive. And of course they have guerrilla deployment and the stalk ability, so they can even move around the battlefield and surprise the enemy without them knowing about it. So that's a nice little unique thing that Sparta gets, is that its second class citizens are apparently good at sneaking around, and their units reflect that. Very cool, nice big shields as well to help with that melee defense, because it is quite low at 7 and their armor is only at 15, so they will die to skirmishes quite easy. But they will also be one of your most useful units early on in the campaign. Which one shall we do next? Let's save the best for last out of them. So let's go to your Allied Thurio Swordsman. These guys operate in the same way that the Allied Peltus and Allied Archers do. They'll come from your Perioikoi social class. And these guys are just Thurio Swordsmen. I've talked about Thurio Swordsmen at length in a lot of my videos. Even in my most recent Greek video I did for Syracuse, I think it was. I said I'm trying not to talk too much about Thurios anymore because they're just, I don't know, they're kind of lackluster. In the most recent update, they did get a slight buff to their aggression stats, like attack, and I think weapon damage as well. But, they're still not really that great. The main thing about this unit, though, that is useful is that they have 300 men per unit. So that is quite a lot to have average stats with. A melee attack of 9, which is quite respectable. But then a melee defense of just 12, charge bonus of 13, pathetic. Weapon damage of 23, which is okay. AP of 3, bonus versus infantry of 2. Armor of 15, base morale 46. That morale is nice. But that's kind of it. I mean, they don't even have any extra bonuses or traits. They only have a low stamina as well, so they're going to get tired fairly quickly. They don't have guerrilla deployment like the other Perioikoi swordsmen do. To be honest, pretty much any day of the week, I'm getting the Perioikoi swordsman. The one time, well, not the one time, but one of the few times I did get these guys to be a large part of my army, they got slaughtered. And I think they even got slaughtered just by like Libyan swordsmen or something like that, which you wouldn't expect them to do terrible against, but they really did. I'll have to go back and watch the video I uploaded of that to see why they did. I don't know what it was, but my Thurio swordsman did terrible in my campaigns, and I don't really recommend you use them because you have better options available, or at least more cost-effective options available. And speaking of better options, this is the best it gets for you in the swords department. This Spartan Forex swordsman, an absolutely gorgeous looking unit. Their armor looks incredible. These guys are probably one of the best looking units in DEI in my opinion. Just they have a massive amount of variety. They have the red cloaks, the big shields. They have the extremely cool swords. Can we get maybe a close up if I come from this angle? There is one sword there, although the rest of them have like a curved kind of sword, I think. We can't see it right now. Alright, that's okay. The point is that these guys look friggin' insane. Very, very cool. Variety in the helmets even. These guys are the absolute best that Sparta has to offer in the sword department. They can be just as useful, if not more useful, than your hoplites though. That's because these guys have a lot of these similar statistics that your hoplites do. For example, compared to your reformed Spartan hoplite unit, they have slightly less morale at 52 instead of 56. They have an armor 28 versus 35, but this is for your probably your best Spartan hoplite unit besides your bodyguard unit. Oh no, it would be the Forex hoplites. Alright, let's compare it to the Forex hoplites. Weapon damage of 24 versus 26. Melee attack of 16 though. That is very, very nice indeed. Melee defense of 11, which is kind of low, but it's still pretty good considering their massive attack. Charge bonus of just 18. Weapon damage of 24 though. So these guys are just slightly lower in morale and armor. They're actually quite a bit lower in armor, but it's still good at 28. And then compared to your Spartan Forex hoplites. But these guys are still very, very fantastic. They're just incredibly impressive. They have even a good stamina despite them being very heavily armored. And I really can't stress how useful they are. However, they do come from your top social class, the Homoioi social class. So if you lose a unit of them, that's 200 Spartans that are gone. And that doesn't sound like much, but when you lose like maybe 2 units that are down to half strength, you need to replace both of those units quite quickly, and that's going to be tough. And so you're not going to have a lot of these guys in your army, sadly. It's just not really going to happen unless you really try to dedicate a lot of time focusing on core units. But even then, you will have to use AOR Merc units to fulfill the swordsman role for you because you're very limited in your options. I would ignore the Thurio swords most of the time. I'm sure there'll be people who have their reasons for using them instead. I just don't agree with using them. I would rather go Periokoi or Forex swords any day of the week. But anyway, that's enough about the swords. Just 3 bloody units. Now let's get to the insane amount of spear options we have here. I'm going to try and skip over some of the more basic units, but there is definitely a lot to say. So first off, let's select these guys very quickly. Okay, so we have the one. Oh, actually, no, it's 2 really. No, I guess it was. Well, yeah, you would say it's technically 3. Don't worry about it. I'm just talking to myself. First off, we have these Spartan Helits. These guys, once again, they bear the title of Helit, or basically slave in Spartan society. That means that they're going to have low morale, could have poor attack and defense stats, and they do here as well. Although their melee defense is at 12, which is kind of surprising. But it's still not very good. They have no armor. Weapon damage is at 20, which is really okay considering that they're so cheap and low tier. But they are incredibly cheap. They have like an upkeep of 40 something on the Grand Campaign. So if you do need levy units, this is your levy unit there.
Pike infantry, ready.
Then we jump up though to the cream and butter of the Spartan army, which is your Spartan Hoplites. These guys will form a very, very nice solid core of your armies from turn 1 onwards. However, once again though, they come from your social class known as a homioi, the highest tier of Spartan society. These guys are your citizens, and that means that they will be in very short supply. So I wouldn't use this as your first battle line. I'll use this either as a second battle line, or if you do use it as a first battle line, keep them back until the enemy skirmishes are dealt with, and then let them grind down the enemy hoplites, and they will do just friggin' fantastic. Here is their stats if you do want to check them out. I won't say all of them, but I will point out they have a base morale of 49, 40 friggin' 9, and they have an armor 28. Just wow. Just wow. Absolutely impressive. And of course they have the Phalanx ability, which will help them in defense. And again, keep these guys in the Phalanx once they're getting involved in combat, or when they're about to be involved in combat. Get them in Phalanx. Don't let them just sit there without it, otherwise they won't do anywhere near as good as they could.
Spartans!
Then though, we move on to Spartan Light Hoplites. Now this is an interesting unit because it actually isn't really a Spartan unit, it's a Helit Spartan unit. These guys basically form the most bottom tier of your hoplites possible. They do have the Phalanx ability, so they are useful, but the stats are definitely extremely lower compared to, say, your Spartan hoplites we just checked out. Most notably, the morale is down to 37 compared to 49 for your base hoplites or core hoplites. So these guys I really just wouldn't recruit unless you're really desperate for population, since they do come from your Helit class. This could be a good alternative as a first front line to go in and let them die against, like, say, Macedonian pikes, and then bringing your better hoplites. It's up to you how you go about it, but yeah, that's them. 200 men per unit. I have a Phalanx ability. That is about as impressive as they get. And then we have the Spartan Light Pikemen unit. These are basically the same kind of unit as the Light Hoplite unit we talked about. These guys are Helits, or apparently freed Helits who are able to buy their way into service, whatever that means. Basically, these guys are slaves or former slaves, and as a result of that, they don't have very good morale. They're not really willing to die for you on the battlefield. But they do have good armor at 25, decent weapon damage at 25, and their melee attack and defense is decent considering they come from just your Helit social class. So use and abuse these guys as much as you can. They will help you get an edge over the Macedonians because they will be using pikes. This will be your pike answer, at least early on. You won't have too many good pikes until you really start to get into your reforms as Sparta, which won't happen till later on in the campaign. So keep that in mind. Those guys will actually be quite useful. But then we move on to your reformed Spartan Hoplites. This is the next unit above your Spartan Hoplites, which is first tier Spartan Hoplites. Comparing them to the Spartan Hoplites, though, they just have better armor at 35, and then better morale at 56. But beyond that, they're the same as the regular Spartan Hoplites in every way. Same amount of men, same Phalanx ability. They can hide in the forest, discipline, good stamina. And they look friggin' amazing too. I would nearly argue that these guys look better than your General's Bodyguard because they have the cool, like, ab little cuirass here. Which kind of brings to mind the 300 movie of the Spartans. But, I mean, I guess there they were all basically walking around naked. But here, they just look badass. I think this is like... It's almost like the pinnacle of what you would expect a Spartan Hoplite to look like. Strong, spear in hand, shield in hand, ready to rock. That's a Spartan Hoplite right there. Right there. If you've ever seen one, that's where they are. Just fantastic unit all around. Absolutely crushing stats. I really got to do a Hoplite video soon. I'm talking about what ones are the best and what aren't very good. But I'm really thinking that the Spartan Hoplites will be mentioned in being one of the top 5, if not the top 3 best in the game. But I'm not going to say too much more because I don't know for sure. I need to do some research.
Spartans!
Then we move on to your Spartan Pikemen though. These guys are absolutely fantastic. As long as they don't get hammered by enemy skirmishers. Even though you have an armor of 28 and a melee defense of 11, don't let that let you be complacent against enemy skirmishers. I've lost entire battalions of these guys just to like a levy unit pelter skirmisher. They can get obliterated, especially if they're getting hit in the back from enemy skirmisher fire. They will lose a lot of men very quickly. If they don't though, and they're attacking front on and they're in their phalanx formation, let's see real quick. Oh, they don't put down their pikes till the battle starts. These guys will do insanely well for you. And they just have excellent statistics. They're not the best pikemen in the game, don't get me wrong about that. But they carry on the Spartan core unit tradition of having very high morale at 49. Combining that with your armor, good attack and defense stats. They will do very well and serve you very well as a main battle line unit against the other Diadochi factions such as the Seleucids, Macedonians, and Egypt if you end up fighting them as well. These guys will hold the main battle line for you. They will lose against the Silver Shield Pikemen and other elite Pikemen of the Diadochi, so do be careful, but against their basic tier units, these guys will last a very long time, and even then they will often beat them. But anyway, that's it for the Pikemen now. Now we're getting down to Hoplite Central down here. So now we get to the best Hoplites that you get access to, except for your General's Bodyguard unit, and they share the same exact statistics actually as your General's Bodyguard except for morale and attack. With these guys having a morale of 56 and an attack of 9. This is your Spartan Forex Hoplites. Obviously you don't get them until the Forex reforms. Once again, wow, look at that uniform. A lot of purple, a lot of red, and then some very nice grays as well mixed in with bronze. They're just looking very unique, colorful, and powerful. And that's what you want when you're playing as Sparta. Sparta is, if you could describe Sparta in one word, it would either be power or discipline. In my opinion, it would be power. Not necessarily as in like a world power, but as in like brute force, human strength, human power, manpower. And these guys display that very, very thoroughly, very nicely. Just wow, man, just incredible statistics. These guys are what will be contending for one of the best hoplite units in the game. Not including pikemen, of course. This is just for hoplites. Wow. Armor 38, base round 56, melee defense 21. I mean, I could read these stats and we could, get all hot and heavy just looking at these units. Their statistics are attractive. They're very, very good. These guys can win you some very nice battles if, and I stress if, they're not going up against pikemen. Even an average tier pikeman unit will make these guys suffer purely because of the difference in the weapons. Size does matter, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this comparison here. This spear, this soldier from your best hoplite unit you get besides your General's Bodyguard, is about a third of the way up of the Pikemen unit. You do the math and let me know how you think these guys are going to go against these Pikemen units. Even though they're better well trained, it's like giving someone a gun and having them go up against someone with a knife. You know what I mean? The person with the knife might be extremely skilled, but if they can't reach the person with the gun because they shoot them before they get close, then it doesn't matter. So these guys, they will probably beat Pikemen units they go up against, but they'll take big casualties. And of course, as it goes for all of your units, do not let them get struck in behind by skirmishes. That will be their core failing. That and cavalry recharges and elephants, of course. But going up against swords and hoplites, they will grind them down and demolish them the majority of the time very nicely. Again though, Homoi social class, so be careful how many you get.
Ready for orders.
But then we have your Spartan guest hoplites, and these guys are basically allied hoplites that come and serve for you. They are belonging to the Perioikoi social class, so that is helpful. And they have pretty good statistics across the board. They're very respectable Spartan hoplite unit here. They'll basically be better than the Greek Athenian hoplites. Maybe not their veterans, but they will give their average ones a run for their money. You can use these guys as a main battle line if you so need to. It's up to you. I'm not reading the stats of many units, keep in mind, because a lot of them are similar and they only are changing by a few things. Or at least the story is kind of the same, but the numbers change slightly. So if we compare your guest hoplites to your Forex hoplites, the numbers are different, but again, it's kind of the same story. They have a great defense, fantastic melee defense at 19, an armor of 35, an attack of 8. Comparing those stats to the Forex hoplites, so that's a melee attack of 9, defense at 21, and then they have a armor of 35 for the Forex hoplites. So they'll basically perform the same role, just not as well as some of your other hoplites, but they will do it better than others. So once again, looking awesome. I'll try to get as many close-ups as I can here, but we do have a video to get rolling on. So if you do want to see more close-ups, go on and check out my Spartan campaign. Link down below. Anyway, let's hurry up now. Perioikoi hoplites. These guys will help you out a lot in your first 20 to 30 turns and beyond that. But mainly because they come from the Perioikoi social class. They're the first Perioikoi hoplites you get access to. And as a result of that, these guys will help you form a good battle line when you can't form them up with your Homoi social class units. So focus on trying to get these guys, if you do want to use a hoplite based army, which you kind of have to, at least for the first while until you start getting pikes. But even then, you'll still be using hoplites to some extent.
Ready.
But comparing this unit to your other ones, its armor is dropping back down to the 20s at 28. Base morale is only at 43, which isn't bad, but it is nowhere, I wouldn't say nowhere near as good, but it is lower than the majority of the other units that we talked about that aren't Helit units. Helit units will always be low morale. These guys are back to they're in average territory. They're going to be losing to the solid Greek hoplites of Athens or Macedon. They'll beat their levy units definitely, and they might beat their average hoplites, but veterans and above, these guys will get smashed. So be careful with them. They will need some support to win the day for you.
Spartans!
And of course, they have the Phalanx ability. Now we move on to his Spartan Gifts. So these guys come from your Homoi social class, so I personally have no idea why you would recruit them. Your Homoi people are just so precious and so irreplaceable. I really cannot recommend getting this unit. They basically act as a fast-moving light hoplite unit, and because they're light hoplites, they're going to die very easily. They have a melee defense of 19, which is massive, but an armor of only 8. So if they're getting hit by archer fire from this side, on the right side over here, or in the rear, they're going to get friggin' demolished. And you lose what could have been, some of your best units, because you got this little plebas spear unit. I'm sorry, it's just, I can't imagine why you would use this when you have other exposable spearmen units at your disposal, such as the Helits. Send them into the death. That's what they're there for. Bugger it. I know the majority of your other homoioid units are just pure hoplites who are going to be holding a formation for you rather than helping out cav like this unit's designed to. But you don't need them to. Use your Helits or use your Furios spearmen.
Spear infantry ready.
300 men per unit once again, so that is very nice. They even have a javelin. Your Furios spearmen. This is a Furios unit I can recommend, especially for playing as Sparta. Your Cavs will need help to win the day. Even the AOR and Merc units you get, they will need some help. This is where it is. It's either this or your Skiry Swordsman. They'll be coming in to help out your Cav. I recommend this to go up against other enemy cavalry. Like I said, 300 men per unit. They don't have any formation though. And they don't have guerrilla deployment, which would be very, very nice if they did, but they don't. But they have decent discipline, expert charge defense, and they have a good stamina. Speed of 3, so they'll be able to keep up with your cav once they're in a fight. And the statistics are looking pretty good across the board. They do only have an armor of 15 though. It's a little bit low than what you want. It would be nice if they had like some chest plate or something to give them like 20 armor, maybe 23 or something, but they don't. They're quite basic with their armor, and so that is where they're going to falter. They will lose against decent swordsmen, and they will take pretty decent casualties against skirmishers, but they do have a melee defense of 17, so that big shield will help them out. But that armor isn't really going to help them once they do get hit. An armor of 15 is helpful, but it's not amazing, and so they will die to skirmishers. But anyway, that's it for all of your spearmen. As you can see, you're very hoplite heavy. You do have some innovation, basically reforms that focus on pikemen, so use those as much as you can, especially against the Diadochi, but also against someone like Rome. Rome will lose with their legionnaires against your pikemen, so that's a very nice thing to keep in mind. But anyway, we've covered all of your infantry. Now it's time to very quickly cover your limited cavalry. Let's start off with the skirmisher cav.
Cavalry.
Allied Furios cavalry. The same as your other allied units, if they have allied in the name. They're coming from your periodical social class. These guys, I really also don't really recommend using either. I would rather just focus on recruiting AOR mercenary units as skirmisher cav. These guys can be helpful. Their statistics aren't terrible, but I found them dying extremely easy in my campaigns. I couldn't leave them alone in a battle for long, and I also couldn't let them take any fire from the enemy. These guys have only an armor of, 23? Yeah, 23. Which doesn't sound too bad, but when they're on horseback, that is kind of low. Especially considering that's the best your skirmishers get. Because besides that, you have your Spartan Cavalry. These guys have an armor of 23, but all of their other statistics are lower than the allied cav, pretty much across the board. Although they do have a charge bonus of 44, but even then, they only have a melee attack of 8 and a defense of 7. Whew, yeah, this in my opinion falls into the same category as the Spartan youth spearmen. Just don't recruit them. This comes from your homoioid social class. Don't bother getting them. Either get your allied cav from over here, or just recruit mercenaries. And you have some of the best skirmisher cav in Greece right there waiting for you as mercenaries. So don't recruit these guys, in my opinion. I really wouldn't. Their stats aren't very good, and even though they're not terrible, it's just not worth wasting that manpower when you could be getting such more powerful and cost-effective units. These guys are going to be not even glass cannons, they're just fragile as they are. Bottom line is, stay away from your skirmisher cavalry, in my opinion. Now let's move on to your last two units that we have to talk about. So here we have your allied cavalry. Again, another allied unit you'll notice. As Sparta expands out of the Peloponnese, it will be relying very heavily on its allies, and this unit is definitely no exception. This is basically your Equites for Sparta. They will be forming your melee attack role. They'll be dealing with enemy cavalry, hunting down enemy skirmishers, and charging into the rear of the enemies with a charge bonus of 50, which is actually quite substantial. Their melee attack is only at 8 though, so they're not all that aggressive. Defense of 13, which how much? 6 comes from the shield, so that's quite good. Armor of 31, which is quite nice. And a speed of 7, so they're quite fast. So this is probably your most standard basic cavalry unit that you'll be using if you want to recruit from your Perioikoi people. It's up to you if you want to. Again, you just have much better options in the AOR and mercenary community, depending where you go. I mean, if you go north into like the barbarian areas, like around the Danube and such, cavalry up there will be quite limited until you get to the Scythians. So your cavalry will come in very handy then. But around Greece, Anatolia, the Levant, there's much better cavalry out there that you can rely on. So not terrible, but yeah, I would, out of the cavalry that we've seen so far, I wouldn't recruit your skirmisher cav. I'd focus on getting this instead. And they don't have any javelin, no, none at all. So do keep that in mind. You don't get that freebie. However, now we get to the very cool unit that Sparta has received. This was added in the most recent 1.2.7 patch. This is why I didn't want to do Sparta instantly while I was doing my Spartan campaign, because I knew that there was more units coming. And this is one of them. Your picked Ionian Lancers. This is Sparta's only answer to having any kind of dedicated shock cavalry. As you can see, you're a Lancer cavalry unit, which means even though you have a charge bonus of 52, which is only 2 more than the melee cav we just checked out, you have a lance, which gives you a melee attack of 15. Very, very nice. Weapon damage of 31. That's a whopper there. Bonus versus infantry of 3. AP of 3, which is pretty pathetic, but it's still there and adds up. Armor of 38. Base morale of 52. Very, very good overall. The stamina is only average, so they will get tired as the battle goes on, but it will take them a while. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out this unit. This is one of the better Greek options for shock cavalry in the area. Macedonians will still outclass you completely in cavalry with their Rose squadrons though, as will the Seleucids. But this is a fantastic unit to charge into the rear of enemy hoplites. Just into the rear of anything really, it will demolish it. It will do very, very well. They're obviously tailored towards fighting enemy infantry. Don't let them get stuck in extended melee if you can avoid it. But they won't do too terrible either. They'll kill a lot on the charge, deal a lot of damage. And then after that, when they are hitting the enemy, which will be quite often, they have a weapon damage of 31. So you could use this unit to take on a low tier melee unit of the enemy. But they do only have a melee defense of 6. So they will die quite easily from that. But then they have the armor of 38 to help them not die. So who knows how long they'll last. But I wouldn't recommend you use them in dedicated melee. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for your military. You have about a medium-sized military, however, it's still extremely limited. Your focus is on hoplites and pikemen as your main battle line units. You have swordsmen in support, some cavalry, and you have the most basic forms of skirmishing. So take from that what you will. Obviously, you'll need to rely on mercenaries and AOR units to get you better cav, get you better skirmishers, get you shock infantry, all those kinds of things. Your army is very limited. Overall, you will need to improvise. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the part 3 section of this video. We'll check out the verdict for Sparta. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the part 3 section of this video where we're checking out the verdict for Sparta. I'll give you guys a few final points that I want to discuss, and then we'll talk about the difficulty rating overall for Sparta. So first point I've mentioned, but I will reiterate because it is very, very important. Early on, your entire early game will be focusing on fighting Macedon for hegemony over Greece. It will be a tough fight, especially if you don't rush and try to take out Macedon early on. Not to say that rushing is easy, it isn't. At least not for the average Total War player, in my opinion. They do have very good units from the start of the campaign, and the pikemen will outclass your hoplites, so you really got to pick them apart and try to be mobile with your very immobile hoplites, which is not an easy thing to do. It will require quite a lot of micromanagement. However, like I also said, you beat Macedon, you win Greece, you'll have a fairly easy mid game as long as you can get Rome on your side, so that would be very nice. In addition, my second point is the majority of your units will be outclassing your Greek neighbors, at least your city-state style neighbors. Rhodes, Knossos, Athens, Aetolia, what else is there nearby? That's I would say Epirus, except Epirus has pikemen like Macedon, but you usually don't really end up fighting Epirus, or if you do, it's just like their home garrison in Apollonia, so that's not too much of an issue. Cyrenaica to your south does have pikemen, so yeah, I would guess it would be mainly those factions I listed. Your military will outclass theirs, so even though you're probably going to be using like just one army to go and take out multiple settlements, your hoplites will still crush the hoplites that will be sent over from Crete and from Athens and whatnot. Your guys will be very, very professional as long as you have that core homoioi social class in your military. But then again, it's hard to do that because you are lacking in population, so it is definitely not as clear cut as, hey, your units are better, just make them go head to head and get an easy win. It's not like that at all. But it is worth mentioning that you should be a little bit more confident in your troops. You will notice it after you play a few battles that your Spartan hoplites in particular, they'll feel invincible. As long as they don't get outflanked or hammered by skirmishes, you'll be surprised on this amount of numbers that just a hoplite unit can do in terms of kills. It's very impressive, and it's a lot more than what I thought would be possible. I usually expect those numbers from shock infantry or elephants or swordsmen. So yeah, overall, what limited military you do have is actually quite good. Last 2 points to make. If you can take all of Greece, like I said, try to befriend Rome as much as you can if you want to have a fairly average difficulty campaign. If you do befriend Rome in any campaign, it's going to make it easier. If you don't befriend Rome and you try to keep them at bay with your navy, good luck with that. Your navy isn't in very good shape. Although Greece does have some good AOR units available, so that will help out. But yeah, if you can't befriend Rome, then good luck, especially if you're playing on one of the higher difficulties. If they take Apollonia and have a foothold in Greece, if you don't push them out quickly, they will run you over. They will send armies your way. They'll be focused on Sicily and Carthage, but they also will focus on the player wherever you are. And if you're in Greece, they're going to come to Greece. So do keep that in mind. Rome can ruin your entire campaign if you don't play your cards right with them. And then that is basically it. Of course, I could reiterate again, but I'm just going to basically briefly state it. Population, population, population. It is a big issue for you throughout your entire campaign. I know I've said this a lot, but really Sparta is very different to any other faction in DEI. There's no other faction that comes close to it in terms of population management that's required, in my opinion, at least from what I've seen. Sparta is desperate for their citizens to be fulfilling their ranks in battle, and you will experience that. You very well could lose a majority of your fighting population within the first 10-15 turns if you don't initiate the correct battle at the right time. It's all about timing, really. So that's my last point. Population. That's really all you need, is the one word. So what difficulty level are we getting this? Alright, I did say if you befriend Rome, you will have an easier time. However, considering that you will need to be creative and you will need to focus on basically AOR merc units to help your military with its massive downfalls with skirmishing, cavalry, shock infantry, swordsmen, although you have some decent swordsmen, but you know what I mean. Because you have to balance a lot of things with the mercs and AOR units, your economy is going to be rough early on. You won't be fielding multiple armies. You'll have one main army, really, and even then, that will be barely making a profit until you take all of Greece, probably. Because of that, because your difficulty against Macedon, there's quite a lot of things to consider, and overall, in my opinion, this turns into a 7 out of 10 difficulty rating. They are a hard faction. They're kind of close to being very hard, but just their hoplite units and pikemen that they get access to that are part of their core roster, they're insane. They're absolutely powerful. They're monsters. They will destroy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this video hasn't been too long. I appreciate you all watching. As always, leave suggestions down below. Our next video will probably be Rhodes or Egypt, or at least our next faction overview will be. I apologize for not getting a Parthian campaign out last week, but I'm going to try and remedy that with making a little bit of a longer one for this week to try to make up for it. Although we aren't too far away from having episode 10 of our Parthian campaign, which of course means an hour-long special, at least on this channel. That's something I'd like to keep going, but let me know if you guys are interested in that as well, although that is a few weeks away from now, at the least. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.